Welcome to this Ubuntu Project video facilitated by Zentertainment Enterprises. Be sure to like and subscribe if you learned something new. Now, onto the video.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Today, we're going to be having a conversation about intersectionality as it relates to cultural differences. If you don't know already, my name is Damilola Adesina, and I am a therapist, licensed professional counselor in Houston, Texas, and I'm also a first-generation Nigerian American. And today, my platform or format is a little bit different. I invited my dear friend Funmto to rescue me. Funmto is a therapist, but she's based in Nigeria. So I'm going to have her introduce herself, and we're going to jump into our topic for today.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Funmto Ogunbanwo. I'm a clinical mental health therapist. Like Dami said, I run a therapy practice back in Nigeria called Ibio Therapy and Wellness. And I see individuals that have experienced trauma, going through life transitions, experiencing depression, anxiety, and just helping people feel like the best versions of themselves. So that's me.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So my goal today in this particular session, and we are calling it Intersecting Borders. My goal today is for you to be invited into a conversation that Funmto and I actually have already had. So that's why I knew she would be the perfect person for this particular topic. So hopefully you feel like you're part of that conversation. So listen in and feel free to jot down any questions that you may have or drop any questions that you may have in the comment section, and I'll be sure to try and respond. So I'm going to start off by asking you an interesting question, Funmto, that I've asked before, but I'm curious if it changed.
Okay.
How do you believe, how do beliefs and traditions in Nigeria affect how people view and treat mental health problems?
Yeah. So it affects how people view and treat mental health problems in a very strong way. And I think it's because like as Nigerians, we're very rooted and grounded in like our beliefs, our culture. We're very big on those things, right? And so themes like beliefs and culture, depending on, what tribe you might be from, but I've noticed that with Nigeria as a whole, right? So we typically don't tend to share things a lot, right? So, an example would be like if a family is going through difficulty, the parents might tell the children that don't tell anybody about this, right? And so, of course, as a child, if you've heard that message, when it's now time for you to become an adult, if you're going through a difficult time, it might be difficult for you to share with someone and you may not be able to understand why, but well, it's because, when you were going through difficult times as a kid, your parents told you not to share. So that definitely plays a role in how people, just like treat mental health and view mental health. But then also just our culture when it comes to seeking help in general. And I mean, even just like healthcare, right? We're very much a do-it-yourself kind of culture, right? Like if you have malaria, go and take anti-malaria. If you have a headache, go and take Panadol. So we're very much a do-it-yourself, and we usually seek medical help as like the last resort. So we literally see that with mental health, right? And because mental health hasn't been spoken about a lot, there's like a stigma around it. So if we take those two things into consideration of like, not sharing a lot and also, the poor culture when it comes to seeking help, seeking professional help, it just really shows up with seeking mental health help. But we're starting to see a change. We're starting to see a change, especially among like the younger population. So like Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and thanks to social media and a lot of like the advocacy work that a lot of NGOs have done, we're seeing people talk more about therapy. We're seeing people, post about like their experiences on therapy. And therapy is a thing that people are more aware of, but there's still a long way to go. So.
You mentioned the stigma around mental health in Nigeria, and I want to share with the audience, like you schooled in Dallas. You got your
Yes.
master's here at Dallas, and then you went back home. Were you expecting to face issues or trouble when it comes to like the stigmatization of mental health?
Yeah.
For you?
Yeah. So I knew that came with like, just like the
Yeah, of
package. And
course.
even before I decided to go back home while I was so I went to both undergrad and grad school in Texas. So while I was in undergrad, I knew that there were a lot of stigmas that were prevalent, right? But then in like 2015, 2016, I would say that's when we really started to see people talk about mental health and it became a thing in
Mhm,
Nigeria, or it started becoming a thing in Nigeria. So I
mhm,
knew that I would face stigmas. And, I still kind of do even in like the subtle ways, right? Like
mhm,
if I introduce myself as a therapist, I get the silly jokes of like, oh, you're just working with mad people.
mhm,
Or, there's a federal neuropsychiatric hospital in Lagos and people, would often, it's commonly called Yaba left,
mhm.
right? Which can be derogatory. So people would often, make a joke. Exactly. People
Oh,
would often
God.
make a joke
That's not
like, oh,
funny.
it's not funny, but it's funny because we're Nigerians,
Yeah,
we make jokes at the most inappropriate things. But
yeah,
people often like make a joke like, you're just working with people you have left, silly things like that, right?
yeah.
So that's kind of how like the stigma still shows up these days. But even in terms of like just like healthcare in general, right? Unfortunately, healthcare is a privilege when it comes to Nigeria and other parts of the world.
Mhm.
So the people that may not be privileged enough to access healthcare, they might not even have an understanding of mental health, let alone be able to, say that I need help. So there's that stigma that still exists.
Yeah. So knowing like their stigmas, so you went back home, you have a practice, you're ready,
Mhm.
you're geared up, you're like, I got this. I'm gonna
Was I?
this is your livelihood. You got to eat, you know?
I do have to eat.
Yeah, it's not indomine you're eating. You're eating
No.
well. So what approaches did you have to take in order to help either educate or promote acceptance and support of mental health?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that before I even talk about approaches is like what I had to do as a person, and it's
Mhm,
really just be patient,
mhm,
right? Like a lot of the things that deem as like common knowledge,
mhm.
it's news to people. Like it's literally breaking news. I remember I hosted a workshop sometime last year, and it was on anxiety. And I was beating myself up about it because I thought I just did like the bare minimum. I just defined anxiety, went through coping tools. I thought it was very basic,
Yeah.
right? And at the end, come and see people saying, oh my gosh, this was so good. Like I
Mhm.
learned so much, and they were able to identify. And
Yeah.
it was really like a humbling moment for me because it was like, this is information that I have readily available. And I think it's so like basic, but to somebody that hasn't heard it before, and they're given the information, like it's breaking news and it's insightful to them. So I really had to be patient
Mhm,
when it comes to, just like breaking that stigma. And also realizing that not all the work doesn't just lie on me,
mhm,
right? Because I used to think that, oh, I have to be the one to educate people. And I do that, right? So I educate in terms of like sessions, and even just like with my social media presence. I know that you've described our Instagram as very like educative and stuff like
Yes,
that,
it is.
right? And that's one of the reasons because a lot of these concepts are very foreign to people. But they're not putting pressure on myself. Like I'm not the one that has to talk about everything, right? It's like people encouraging other people. So whether that's my clients to talk to other people around them,
Mhm.
right? To get perspectives from other people so that that conversation can continue and it's not just on one person. It doesn't the ball doesn't lie on one person to, carry.
And make the thing happen. Yeah. I
Yeah.
heard you mention like you being patient personally and you kind of hunkering down on education
Hmm.
as a way to kind of help bridge this gap around the stigma of mental health. But I'm curious, are there any cultural values that particularly you had to consider or keep in mind about the culture of Nigeria or Nigerians in general when you're helping your clients from
Hmm.
that standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is something that I've even spoken to you about, being in Texas and being trained in like the US education system, especially when it came to counseling and therapy,
Mhm,
ethics is a big thing,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I had to realize by practicing in Nigeria that it may not exactly copy and paste directly. So one of like the cultural factors that I have to keep in mind is that Nigerians are very personable people, right? We like to feel like, okay, we can get along well with another person,
Mhm.
or we like to feel close to, someone else. So that's something that I had to like, keep in mind, right? That, okay,
Mhm.
my clients may want to feel comfortable with me. And, I remember the first time that like a client reached out to hug me, I kind of froze.
So back
I
up.
kind of, I kind of froze. But then I was like, they initiated it. And like,
Yeah.
I know that like if I were to say no, what good would it do? I felt
Yeah.
comfortable receiving the hug and, they initiated it. So those are some cultural factors I have to keep in mind. It's just like the heavy values that we place on, like relationships, right?
Yeah.
And then also family.
Mhm.
Right. So family is a big thing for people, especially when I work with adolescents.
Mhm.
So just helping to like educate their parents, right, and getting them in that process as well.
Mhm.
And also just realizing that even when I'm working with adults, like a lot of the difficulties that they may have experienced might be as a result of like familial experiences,
Mhm.
right? So, kind of looking at it from that angle, but not necessarily like, oh, your family's to blame, right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of people can handle, you know, such difficulties with like, okay, my family is to blame for why I'm like this, but it's kind of like broadening the picture of like, okay, family was a training ground. And so this may have been your experience with family. And so just introducing newer concepts to them, but in like bite sizes that they may be able to consider. I
Yeah.
hope that answered the question.
No, 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 it absolutely does. I think what I heard you say was like the familial aspect of things.
Mhm.
And then because of the familial aspect, ethics will look different. And
Yes,
and you have to uphold the culture because I think that's really what cultural competence is about, right?
absolutely.
Nigerian as a culture, family is like the core, the unit of what kind of keeps the whole system running. And
Mhm.
you cannot negate that and then
Mhm.
say you want to help people in that regard. It's funny, you see your clients and they want to hug you. Meanwhile, I only see my clients virtually. And I
Oh, yeah.
so it's interesting. I was like, what would I do if a client wanted to touch
Hug you, right?
me? I do that back. No, that I think that's really important, right? I think there's this book that I read and this work that I follow where it talks about decolonizing therapy
Hmm.
and talking about the impacts of colonization on therapy from the beginning. And I think there's a lot of conversation around like, cultural competence requires the removal of this idea of what it should be, because
Hmm.
before therapy was therapy and these books were books and theory was theory, they had the elder who would pass down, I don't know,
Wisdom.
proverbs. That
Hmm.
was therapy. So it looked different, obviously. You had
Absolutely.
the matriarch of the family who was sitting
Yeah.
on the two parties and like, why are you fighting? What's going on? Let's da 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 da. So that was their therapy. That's what it looked
Mhm.
like. So people did the best they could with what they have.
Yeah.
As things and times have evolved and changed and people receive knowledge, aspects of that are still prevalent. So it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah,
It makes
absolutely.
it makes me think about myself and like some cultural factors that I, as a Nigerian American, because I hold a dual identity, being that,
Hmm.
you know, born in Nigeria, they took me out of my country, brought me to this country, and was like, figure this out,
Yeah.
yourself. And so at home is very much Nigerian, but in the world is very much, Americanized. I remember this funny story. My mom would tell me when I was like in second grade, I would kneel to my teacher and then
Oh, wow.
what's wrong with her? I was like, well, nobody told me what's going on. For the longest, I was calling things like nylon bag. They're like, what is nylon? I said, it's a nylon bag. And with the accent, meanwhile, toilet troll. I was calling like the trunk, they call it trunk, and I grew up in
Yeah, yeah.
the South, boot, the boot.
Boots, yeah.
So there is the duality that was present that I then had to like navigate for myself, right? So I think now that, I have a little bit more understanding of who I am and like where I stand in both cultures, I think it's really important when I work with Nigerian Americans is this cultural identity and like acculturation that happens, right? So helping them navigate the balance between preserving cultural identity and also assimilating into American society, right? Because a lot of what you said is really important. It still comes up for my clients because you mentioned a lot of your clients are like Gen Z, millennials, but our parents are like what, baby boomers and whatever generation that came before them. So they're very much like, you know, you got to respect the elders.
Yes.
Deep respect. You can't talk back to them. Very much like the first daughter culture. Like you were almost kind of like this pseudo parent, or the stigmatisms around mental health is prevalent, but for that generation, although it is millennial, so a lot of times it's the conflict between child and parent. And oh, I saw my parent as this, but now my eyes are awakening. How do I navigate this dynamic in this relationship? So that is a lot of cultural factors that I consider when trying to help my clients have a sense of belonging as it relates to who they are right now and what's kind of going on, etc. And another thing that I think is really big is their like socioeconomic status of immigrating, or the experiences that the socioeconomic status of immigration has impacted on their mental health, right? Because you don't come rich, you come poor. Unless, you know, you just have like a really good foundation of family. From, you know, like if you came when you were like 17, more than likely, like you got you knew somebody who knew how to navigate the intricacies of immigration. So it's like you said, a privilege, like, because it costs money, that's not cheap. But a lot of my clients came at a young age and faced a lot of severe socioeconomic status and were poor. Faced, on top of being an immigrant, you face discrimination, and then you face acculturation stress on top of all of that. So those are the things that I have to consider and help them understand, and why trauma or childhood trauma is like where I specialize, so prevalent for them, because it was a lot to kind of like navigate, so to speak.
Yeah. So what would you say, you know, part of like just balancing those two identities, what would you say like your clients have the most difficulty with, or that you see in general that people have the most difficulty with?
In balancing the two, I think it's like they feel guilty because, for example, if let's say, I don't know, I work with a lot of people who I mentioned earlier, like first daughters. And so the first daughter syndrome, I'm making that word up, don't quote me, essentially is somebody we call like, you know, in Igbo culture, they call it the Ada, the person that essentially would help take care and raise the youngest child, right? So they could be mediating fights between their parents. They could be helping their siblings, you know, walk them to school. Did you do your schoolwork? Are you doing your chores? They're considered like the hero of the family. They keep everybody in line and in check, right? So now if I have a client who's considered that, is trying to break free from that, I think the balance is like, am I how do you say, negating my culture? Am I turning my back on my culture and on my family? Essentially, I feel guilty, but I also need to preserve myself, and my mental health ain't where it should be. I feel I am anxious. I am depressed. I might even have a diagnosis of like ADHD, and I can't even keep up, but yet there's this pressure that the culture has on me to show up in this way. And I don't want to disrespect my culture, but this is my truth. So I think like that oftentimes becomes the struggle, and the struggle of balancing the two, because I love being a Nigerian, but this is toxic and it's killing me. Where do I go, and how do I balance the two? And I'm like, well, I can't do nothing about that guilt.
Right.
I can't help you with this. There's a book, we can work it out. So oftentimes people make strides, but some people just get stuck. Because there is just some beliefs of like, but this is my mom. This is my culture. But am I being disrespectful? But how can I? And so forth. Even I had somebody reached out to me who was Nigerian American, but went to move back to Nigeria and struggled because of a lot of elders were just disrespecting, and they struggled because it's like, well, I don't want to seem disrespectful. That's why I moved back here. I
Mhm.
love my culture, but I don't know how to navigate that. And, when you're Nigerian and American and you go to Nigeria, they suss you out. They like,
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah.
not Nigerian
You're
enough.
not Nigerian enough here.
You're not Nigerian enough. So really, really wanting to belong,
Mhm.
and have a place in society and be accepted, but recognizing there are some aspects of the culture that are just toxic.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It is. I'm hearing a bit of like all or nothing thinking. So like if I do this, then it's abandoning this. And if I do that, then it's abandoning that too.
Yeah. So it's really a lot of my work is let me show you a different way.
Mm.
Let me show you a different option. Here's a
Mhm.
choice because people don't know what their options are. Because
Yeah.
Nigerian culture is you're with me or you're for me. My mom used to
Yeah.
tell me, you're either with me or you're against me. Like it. So the culture is all or nothing. So helping people
For
understand
sure.
you can choose and decide based off of like how you want to show up.
Mhm.
Really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I wonder for you, have
Mhm.
you created or found a community of Nigerian therapists in Nigeria also doing the work as you? Is that network huge or big?
Yeah, so I definitely have created like a little community. So there are people that I've reached out to, kind of like I reached out to you.
Yeah.
So there are people that I've reached out to. There are people that actually now that I think about it, I think most people like I connected with them on like LinkedIn or
Okay.
something, right?
Okay.
Because
I be sleeping on LinkedIn. I need to get on
no,
it.
you need to get on, but I mean I also don't like LinkedIn. It's a
Oh, okay.
little
Never mind. Well, now
no, no, no. I think you should do it because it's helpful, but it's like it's almost like it's a little gross because it's like
oh,
I'm bragging about, this great thing that I'm doing.
mm,
That's the energy that LinkedIn gives me,
got
and
it. Got it.
it's yuck. But I mean, it has its perks. Anyway, so
Mhm.
yeah, there's definitely a community. I definitely have a community that like, if I needed to like work through a case with someone or like get ideas with someone, I definitely have that now, and I'm thankful. When I first started 3 years ago now, I didn't have that, so
Mm,
I was having to talk to friends from grad school
yeah.
that were in Texas, and it was great, but I mean they weren't really able to understand like the Nigerian and like cultural nuances, right? Because they weren't Nigerian. um Go ahead.
No, it made me think about like even amongst like your like professional work circle.
Yeah,
You mentioned like, oh, I can meet with these people, but it's not like when you have somebody who is also of the culture doing the work in the
for,
culture. So it
for
kind of like,
sure.
oh, this importance not only for clients to have somebody who's culturally competent, but also as therapists having a community of people in the same like mind in the field as well that you can kind of like glean from, have
Yeah.
advocacy, glean empowerment, and like professional, etc.
Absolutely. And even just like from a running a business, POV, like
Girl,
talking about like the
people
struggle,
laugh.
right? Like talking about it. So, I mean, yeah, so I have a network. Now I can say that I have a network. And I mean, there aren't a lot of therapists. I mean, there are more therapists now, and I feel like we kind of know each other. So
Okay,
there might be people that like I maybe don't know professionally and that like I don't have their number or email,
okay,
but I know of them,
okay.
right? So yeah, we kind of know each other because like it's a smallish circle. So
Mm, so you don't
mhm.
feel too alone, but it's
No, we
growing, like you
don't.
said, in that regard.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
similar to you, I definitely began to build a network of people
That's good.
who I felt like, oh, you doing what I'm doing. Like
Hmm.
let's meet up, let's network, let's build. Because also being a private practice owner too can feel very lonely. You don't
Absolutely.
have coworkers, and you just want to make
Mhm.
sure, like, am I crazy? Okay, okay,
Mhm.
great. Thank you for that. Just kind of affirmation of work too. So I definitely agree with that. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so we can end on this question. So I'm curious, what advice would you give to therapists who are working with Nigerians in
Mm.
Nigeria, to make sure that that particular client or those clients are receiving adequate mental health care?
Yeah. Hmm. I would say be patient,
Mm,
and also like be open-minded,
mm,
right? So in the sense that like it's one thing to learn about like the concepts and the theories in the textbooks and in class, and it's another thing to actually just like get to know the person. And I think we can underestimates like just the power of like just actually listening to someone and like holding space for someone. So my advice would be like that should be your focus, not oh what theories at play here, or like what diagnosis are they struggling with. I think the focus and my advice would be that the focus should be just actually getting to know the person that's across from you, taking into consideration that I mean these things that we've discussed around like the barriers that come with like seeking help. And so for someone to be sitting across from you, then that's a pretty brave thing for them to be doing. So just person first, person centered at the end of the day, right? And just getting to know the person first and seeing the person and not just seeing like a diagnosis or symptoms. Yeah.
That's bars. That's
Yeah.
wisdom. Because
Yeah.
it is true. They left their house to enter Lagos traffic to end
Absolutely.
up in your office.
They're
Just be
investing their money.
present.
Yeah, they're investing their money, investing their time.
Almost seems like, and I said it was gonna be the last one, but it just made me think. It's almost like, it's almost like a social risk to like do this. Cause I mean, obviously it's confidential, so a lot of people won't know, but like going against everything that I was taught to like embark on this kind of new journey. So like meet them where they are, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody, meeting them where they at is just taking into consideration other contexts, right? So if there's resistance, then it's exploring why the resistance may occur, not because, they are exhibiting some clinical, diagnosis, some clinical symptom rather. So
No,
just
that's good. That's
the
good.
person first. What about you?
Great question. What advice would I give? I think in even though mental health is really prevalent in the US, there aren't a lot of Nigerian American therapists because people immigrate to America to not become a therapist.
No, they're trying to do STEM, okay? Or be an engineer.
Trying to be, doctor, lawyer, engineer, they're trying to make a little bit more money, but it's okay. So the numbers are still low. So I would say to any person of color, working with a Nigerian American, understanding the culture, but not feeling like you have to like be the I guess you could say end all bearer or end all be all of that. Like learn from the client, glean in what they are saying. Kind of similar to what you're saying, kind of like you may have to decolonize therapy for a little bit, gain a perspective, ask if you don't know. A lot of clients are willing to do that. And obviously it would be easier to go to somebody that can just get it. I don't have to explain, but a lot where it is not present, being more open-minded and not just kind of shutting it down because it's foreign. And it looks kind of different in that regard, or giving it names like, oh, that's emotional abuse. Just the culture. You know what I mean? So kind of like understanding the difference. So I think it's like being open-minded and educating yourselves would be the things that I would say to people working with the Nigerian Americans.
Yeah.
So yay, we did it. Funmto, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope you guys gained something a little bit from this perspective. I enjoy my conversations that I also always have with Funmto. Funmto, before we leave, how can the people find you? Like, let's say somebody in Nigeria is watching this right now. They want to hit you up, or even in America, because you see.
Yeah, I was gonna say we don't just limit to Nigeria.
You're not restricted like I am.
No, I ain't.
So how can people find you if they want to? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, ibiayo.com. That's IBIAYO.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at IBII.ayo. And you can send us a DM or send us an email. The email is on our website and also our Instagram page, and we'll be sure to get back to you.
Awesome. And my details will be below in the description box, so y'all know where to find me. Thank you guys again for joining, and bye-bye.
Bye.
sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to know when we upload a new video.